So soul ties is not in the Bible. The only one we ever hear about is David and Jonathan's souls being knit together. And I actually this time around, I decided to Google soul ties, and you come up with all this interesting New Age stuff. So we'll take it from the top of the notes here, but we are gonna go through the Bible, and I think that the biggest thing that testifies to soul ties, that they are real and exist, is the fruit that comes when we break them. So we'll start at the beginning. So nephesh is the Hebrew word for soul. It also means life. If we're going to translate it into English, it means a person's entire being and their whole physical existence. So it's not just some kind of like super spiritual, esoteric thing, but it's an actual, your whole being, your whole physical existence. And lots of times it's helpful to think of this as our mind, our will, and our emotions. Those are the three main things we often relate the soul to. So I kind of joined these things and made up a definition for soul tie. So an emotional or relational bond between two or more people where a person devotes their entire being to something or someone else. And I'm sure you've heard us say several times here, unhealthy and unholy. So unhealthy just means harmful to your health, which an unhealthy soul tie can actually be harmful to your health. And an unholy soul tie, repeated sinful, dysfunctional relationship or interactions with concepts, people, and entities. So one example, so this next little part here through number 6 I had gotten from Sophia Rogers. She's under Tikkun. She had a teaching on the soul, and during the time where she was teaching this, or it was very recently after, she was talking about just the groups of mobs that happened during 2020 with like Black Lives Matter and all that. That's the people, right? Their souls are joined together in this kind of unholy cause. So that was just kind of an example of how you can be tied to an idea or a principle or a group in an unhealthy way. So other ways unhealthy and unholy ties are created: abuse, and often the strong bond, it's based on a lot of shame and guilt. Unholy sexual contact, and I put next to that uncovering of nakedness, and you'll see the little footnote there. And so it's not just the actual physical sexual act, but also just this uncovering of nakedness, which was just in the last week's Torah portion or the beginning of this week's. So anytime people share a deep emotion and shared events like birth, war, missions trips, witnessing or being in an accident, going to school together, going through puberty together. So obviously some of these are good soul ties and some of them are not, right? Trauma, accidents, deaths, severe illnesses, and then repeated dysfunctional interactions, like bullying. I was talking to somebody, my hairdresser, and she was talking about how she had had a really dysfunctional relationship with her roommate, but how they're formed this unhealthy tie between the two of them based on this daily interaction that they would have. And one that is not on your list that I had to think about a little bit more is a soul tie with a book or a movie. So this can happen when your identity starts to get mixed up with the characters in the book or movie or TV show or whatever. So if you're like, binge watching, is that bad? Well, no, I'm not saying that. But when you're meditating on it and thinking about imagining yourself being the main character and it really starts to kind of overtake you and be a part of your identity, okay, that would be an unhealthy tie. Okay, so moving down, what does the Bible have to say? As I already said, soul tie is not in the Bible. But we do know that the Bible gives straightforward directions for developing godly relationships and ties. And when we don't follow those, there comes sin, and relationships form in unhealthy and unholy ways. They're made on a shaky foundation. So if we look at just the 10 words, through adherence to Adonai's words, we see blessings for ourselves and our generations. Our souls are to be attached to Adonai foremost. Our soul attachment to him is displayed in our obedience to his commandments. Idolatry, that would be attaching ourselves to other gods or idols. So I didn't put him in the footnotes, but Dennis Prager has a book called The 10 Commandments, where he kind of sort of boots on the ground, what does 10 Commandments look like? And especially in our Western culture, education, arts, money, beauty, possessions, those are all things that can be idols. And then the obvious satanic and occult practices would be an obvious form of idolatry. This is really helpful looking at you, Marie. That was a good place to sit. Okay. Number 3, we carry his name in an honoring way. We celebrate Shabbat, honoring our parents, committing murder, no adultery in our hearts or in action, no stealing. That includes not just stealing possessions, but also stealing people's joy and people's confidence. Do not lie about others, and do not covet what others have. So if you end up looking at this later, you can kind of think through some of these and how relationships formed with these as their beginning and starting point, how that could lead to a bad relationship. All right, we skip down number 1. Let's see. As wrong relational dynamics grow in these relationships, then things start to get more complicated because the enemy will hide in the lies and the wounds that occur as a result of the faulty foundation. So, letter E. Even after coming into covenant with Yeshua and not participating in the sin, we may experience effects from these prior relationships because of the existence of unhealthy soul ties. So sometimes this is something my husband and I have gone back and forth on a lot. Like, there's this view like, okay, now I'm saved, I'm cut off from everything, so why isn't everything better now? And that's really not biblical, right? Because everything's just such a process with how the Lord works and grows us, and he's really interested in developing our character. So that's just not true. So sometimes that's a hidden lens that we have. So I encourage you to reflect on that. Am I thinking that I should be all done and perfected right now? Because it's not, it doesn't go like that. F, in a generational view, consequences and effects of sin that were participated in by previous generations can affect us in our present lives. And the cutting of ties can free us from those effects. And we're going to talk more about that next week in the 4 doors. It's hard not to ask if anybody has questions. Does anybody have questions? Okay. All right. So, moving on. Where does the Bible demonstrate soul ties? Again, we don't have the outright term, but we can kind of look through scripture and see all these different ways that people form soul ties in their different biblical relationships. We see them in evil partnerships producing wickedness, or in the joining of godly love, beauty, and righteousness, favor, and that's where righteousness will prevail. So A, we have marriage, covenant, and sexual relations. In Adam and Eve, Adonai Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall on the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Adonai Elohim built the rib, which he had taken from the man, into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, "This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh from my flesh. This one is called woman, for from man was taken this one. This is why a man leaves his father and his mother, clings to his wife, and they become one flesh." And the Hebrew word there is echad, which means one, and then cleaving to or keeping close. And then Yeshua also emphasizes this: for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to a wife. And then on the other side we have 1 Corinthians that talks about, do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? Shall I then take the members of Christ who unite them with a prostitute? Never. Do you not know that he who joins himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh. So this is obviously referring to the body of Messiah, but also sexual relations with people that you're not married to. And the wording is the same as well, using echad and body and clings. So Ahab and Jezebel, our famous evil partnership in wickedness. Ananias and Sapphira, and Abraham and Sarah. The body of Messiah. So covenant through Yeshua with him and with one another. From him the whole body is fitted and held together by every supporting ligament. The proper working of each individual part produces the body's growth for building itself up in love. Colossians 2, my purpose is that their hearts joined together in love may be encouraged. And then number 3, Paul talks about being joined to one another in the context of the new covenant in Romans 7. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you also were made dead to the Torah through the body of Messiah, so that you might be joined to another, the one who was raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit for God. So between all of us, there's this covenantal holy tie that exists through Yeshua.
Yes.
Okay, loyal friendships, Jonathan and David. And I put the scripture there. I've already mentioned it 3 times. We'll move on from Jonathan and David. Teacher and disciple, Elijah and Elisha, Moses and Joshua. Adoption and family, Ruth and Naomi, Esther and Mordecai. Under F, we have uniting for a cause, Dathan and Abiram. And our last part is salvation and soul ties. And I kind of already addressed this, but 2 Corinthians 5 says, therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Romans 6, for if we have become joined together in the likeness of his death, certainly we also will be joined together in his resurrection, knowing our old man was crucified with him so that the sinful body might be done away with, so we no longer serve sin. For he who has died is set free from sin. And that, I just really thought Jerry's message was so appropriate for starting this class. And there were some of the phrases in there that I actually wrote down at the top of this paper that I felt like if anybody's watched Captain America, it was like a Captain America speech. So some of the phrases he said were new boundaries of potential. We're not trapped in the limitations of our humanity, and newness of life. And I felt like those were such hopeful statements for anything that we might struggle with or whatever. So we remember, while our salvation is complete in Yeshua, the process of healing and salvation does not occur one and done. But every pain that we suffer and have suffered, the Lord invites us to come closer and walk deeply with him. He's always inviting us. Come close. Come close. There's nothing that he can't heal. There's no past thing that he's afraid of or doesn't want to talk about. And 1 Peter. These trials are so that the true metal of your faith, far more valuable than gold, which perishes though refined by fire, may come to light in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Messiah Yeshua. Though you have not seen him, you love him. And even though you don't see him now, you trust him and are filled with a joy that is glorious beyond words, receiving the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls.